My name is Sam. My research project was how important is reading to children's language and cognitive development. I decided to do my question because I've always had an interest in my learning aptitude at the current, my current learning aptitude. And I thought back to my childhood days where Mum and me would sit on the couch and she would read 15 books at a time to me, and I thought, well look, maybe that has resulted in me enjoying English and humanities and writing well. And so I did preliminary research into childhood development and then reading, and then kind of saw the cross-reference in there. So yeah, that's how I got my topic basically, was hoping that reading did have a link to development, and then I eventually proved that yes, my hypothesis, say, if you will, would answer that. Yeah, I did a lot of refining, which I found was quite important to the end product. So my preliminary research would help with that, just having a basic understanding of the topic, and then that helped me understand it so much that I could ask smaller questions, so focus questions, that then would build me up into my major question. It was quite intense documenting all my information because I felt like keeping a journal entry for nearly everything I found was a good idea. So that kept me on par with everything, as well as keeping me organised, and it was kind of like an outlet into my ideas, so putting things that I had read into my own words. So say I read a really sophisticated and academic journal, then putting it into my own words in my journal would help me understand it. I got my information from a range of sources. I did about 3 interviews with professionals like teachers and even a Waldorf educator, so that was looking at alternative perspectives. Also primary sources, other primary sources, and secondary, so blogs, and then academic journals, so more sophisticated kind of information sources like that. In psychology at the time, in Year 11 psychology, we were talking about observational learning, so I could kind of infer from that, from what I've just observed separate to the actual research project itself, childhood reading and kind of my own experiences as well. I did a report style which was directed at educators and children as well as parents, namely early parents or parents thinking about starting a family, to educate them on the importance of reading. And I guess mainly it would also be directed to parents who really hold their children's educational success as a high importance kind of thing. I chose to do the report style because my research was very English literacy based, so I thought writing would suit a literacy based subject. Also the report style, obviously it can be directed at parents and educators and stuff. They can physically pick it up and read it instead of doing a poster like that. I just thought it was the most accessible source for parents and educators. You have to be organised a lot of the time to be able to do it, so that was always being on top of my journals, which I didn't do all the time. So doing that, and also finding people to interview. Sometimes people didn't reply back, but in the end that was okay because I just persevered on and eventually found people. And then within the interviews, it was always hard keeping towards a time frame because you wanted to ask so many questions. But you just have to quickly ask a question and then they'll reply back and that kind of thing. So they were probably my main challenges, as well as probably in the initial stages just understanding quite academic language and that kind of thing. But you know, that came naturally because I was so exposed to it, kind of thing. So yeah. Things that went swimmingly was finding sources, which was very handy. So I think from early days at St. Peter's, you know, we've been taught, you know, keyword searches and like selecting and annotating. So all those processes were easy with the topic, because choosing a good topic, a topic that's not too broad, not too narrow, it allows to find successful sources. Doing the research project a year prior to Year 12 has definitely helped me with my Year 12 studies. I mean, for kids who will do it in Year 12, I can definitely see, you know, the changeover into university being made smoother sailing, I would say, because with my Year 12 subjects, namely business and enterprise and psychology, with research tasks, you have to, you know, embed quotes, and you're expected to know how to embed quotes, have good bibliography, Harvard referencing, and just selecting the basic ability to select appropriate sources are all very important to get, you know, the high range subjects. So the research project definitely exposed me to those things, honed in my abilities, and then I can just transfer them into my Year 12 subjects.